in the adult class this evening in our study of the Law of Moses. So we'll begin with the word of prayer and then we'll sing our song. Wonderful God and Father in heaven, we are so thankful for everything that you do for us. We are thankful for what you have done for us in the past, and we are thankful for who you are and the character that you reveal, or the parts of your character that you reveal to us in Scripture. Help us to emulate those things in our lives. Help us to be holy as you are holy. Thank you for this time that we have to be together in the middle of the week to encourage one another, to get through the rest of the week, and to let our lights shine and to be salt on this earth to those that we are around on a regular basis. Help us to focus on you and on one another, and help us to remove the cares and concerns of this world from our hearts. It's in your Son's holy name we pray. Amen. Pure in heart, O God. Pure in heart, O God, help me to be. May I devote my life wholly to thee. Watch thou my wayward feet, guide me with counsel sweet. Purer in heart, help me to be. Purer in heart, O God, help me to be. Teach me to do thy will most lovingly. Be thou my friend and guide. Let me with thee abide. Purer in heart, help me to be. Purer in heart, O God, help me to be. That I thy holy face one day may see. Keep me from secret sin. Reign thou my soul within. Purer in heart, help me to be. Go to class. Apparently I have to say it. A 12-year-old in a bathroom?
So you're on what? Okay.
In your mom's? Oh, okay. You said it was against the top because you were putting it in the shop. Justin, is this blowing cool air? Yeah, it is. Okay. It was making a weird sound earlier, Victor. It kind of scared me.
They're very, very old.
They are. They are. Well, this one's not as old, is it?
No, I think so.
I know these two on the back are pretty old.
Yeah.
All right. Get to talk about body parts and bodily discharges tonight, so this should be good and fun. John, are we live? Miss Georgie is having trouble.
Yeah, we're live.
Yeah, can't get the class. Someone share me. Let me take care of that real quick. Justin, did you hear any updates from her doctor's appointment?
Yeah.
All right, I just sent it to her, so hopefully she'll find that. All right. Body parts, bodily discharges. Before we begin, we want to remind everyone that impurity or uncleanness does not automatically equal sin. You can become impure ritually or ritually unclean a number of different ways through things that are not sin. We'll talk about this tonight in terms of the husband-wife physical relationship and coming into contact with the dead. If you're going to bury a loved one, you're going to have to come into contact with the dead, and that would make you ritually unclean. So we want to be careful, and I'm emphasizing that here because of a point I'm going to make at the end that's almost going to sound like I'm saying the opposite. So I want you to go ahead and get this part down so we can get back to that in just a minute. The organization of the chapters we're looking at kind of go from a short amount of time to a longer amount of time of being unclean. If you eat something unclean, you're unclean until evening. If you have if a woman has a child, obviously, because that is the only people who can have children, then you're unclean for weeks. If you have leprosy, unless it's healed, you're basically unclean for life. And then, depending on what's being discussed in chapter 15, you might go for a day, a week, or even years in chapter 15 with the laws about discharges there. All right, so we'll dig into chapter, we did 11 on Sunday, and we want to do 12 tonight. If a woman gives birth to a son, I always love it. The ESV says a male child. I have been given a male child. Well, she's going to be unclean for 7 days, and he likens it to the time of that month for her. And she will be unclean just as at that time. The son is to be circumcised on the 8th day, and then she will continue in her uncleanness for another 33 days, making her unclean for how long total after the birth of a son?
41 days.
40 days, right. At which point she goes to the temple. Did I say 30?
No, you said 40.
Okay, all right. Richard's over here making faces. I thought I said something dumb. And at which point she's going to go to the temple and offer sacrifice for her uncleanness. And maybe the best example of this is with Mary and Joseph. After Jesus is born, they go to the temple. And do you remember what they offered?
Turtle doves or something.
Turtle doves, right.
Birds.
And so we find out their economic situation. They were very poor. And so we kind of a little overlap in our information here. All right, the birth of a daughter, she's unclean for 14 days. Obviously, there is no circumcision here. And then she will continue in her uncleanness for 66 days, making her unclean, sorry to make you do math, but making her unclean for a period of how long? 80 days, which is how much longer than with a son?
Why?
Do you all have the same question I have there?
Yeah.
Why? Why? Well, bad news. Moses doesn't tell us. So we kind of, it's all speculation, right? We kind of have to see maybe what's going on here. And I'm just pulling some of this straight from the commentaries. Apparently, scientifically, medicinally speaking, typically there is a greater loss of blood when a daughter is born than when a son is born. Okay? Is that what's going on? Possibly. A lot of people are going to jump straight to this. There is an inherent higher value of boys over girls. And that's not too uncommon. You don't want to just say, oh, well, that patriarchal Bible society. No, all societies have always preferred that for the most part. And so I'm not sure that's exactly what's going on. And in my notes, I can't find a source for this next point, and so I'm left to assume maybe it was my former professor Tommy Peeler who gave me this one, is that maybe she's unclean longer because of the daughter's future loss of blood. That's the issue here, is the loss of blood is the issue. That's what makes the woman unclean for this amount of time. And so maybe she is unclean for longer because her daughter is going to have a regular loss of blood. Yes, sir?
You said Moses doesn't really tell us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would this fall under the category of, if it ain't put out there, maybe we just don't need to know?
Exactly. And that's where I'm going to leave it now. I got that up there. There's you a couple ideas. I'm not Moses. I'm not God. I'm not under the law of Moses. And I'm not a woman. I'm okay. I did want to include this line, though. I thought this was really good. Loss of blood can lead to death. Antithesis of normal, healthy life. Anyone losing blood is at least in danger of becoming less than perfect and therefore unclean. And this line I really like. Thus, blood is at once the most effective cleanser and the most polluting substance when it is in the wrong place. I like that line. And why is that, ladies and gentlemen? What's the biblical reasoning for this? The life is in the blood. Yeah, when it comes to that discussion, you can always go back to that question. The life is in the blood. The life is in the blood. And so, how do we clean the Ark of the Covenant? How do we clean the altar of incense? How do we clean the burnt offering? With blood. How do we prepare and clean the priest for their service as priest? But blood. It's a little weird. You put it on their earlobe, their thumb, and their big toe. That's a little strange, but you clean them with blood. But then when you have blood where it's not supposed to be, that is when we get into the ritual uncleanness, impurity part of that. Did you raise your hand?
I didn't.
Oh.
You better say yes.
Is there any credence to my personal opinion of that since male child was more valued and a girl child was not, it may have been a helper outer to females who had misfortune having a girl child instead of a boy child?
So she's going back to this point, the inherent value of boys over girls, that there would have been we're adults here, there would have been a longer time before they could have started trying again for another boy. Maybe. That could be something to it. Because during this time, the husband would have had to stay away. That's a thought. That's a thought. But again, Moses doesn't say we're not under that law. We're just trying to learn some principles like this. That's why we keep coming back to these more general statements. I'm giving you some stuff to think through, stuff that you'll read in the commentaries, but at the end of the day, we're trying to get some stuff like this here. All right, so let's get out of that one. We got to come back to bodily discharges, excuse me. Leprosy doesn't bother me as much. A couple of things here. The reason it's translated as leprosy is because in the Septuagint, the word is lepra. You can see how they made that jump there. However, it is not related to what is modern day leprosy or elephantiasis. What it does to the skin and that kind of things. Justin, what's the term for elephants and hippos? Is it pachyderms? Is that right? Because of their skin is different, and what happens to the skin with these diseases. It's not related to that. This distinction was blurred in the Middle Ages. And then what we know of leprosy, the deadening of limbs, the falling off of limbs, the nerve damage that goes with leprosy, that actually wasn't even discovered until much later, maybe 1800 or 800 years after Moses. And today it's called Hansen's disease, by the way. And then what Leviticus 13 discusses, the symptoms it gives are not the symptoms of modern day leprosy. And so when I don't have a problem with talking about leprosy in the Bible, just know that it's not talking about modern day leprosy. It's typically just, sometimes in the newer version, just translated skin disease. And you actually have a bunch of different skin diseases that are discussed here. Some argue for psoriasis in this. I think even the term in the ESV is even used at one point, leukoderma, I believe. Yeah, in verse 39, when you have spots on the skin that are paler than in other places. We don't see these on white people as much. We typically will see them on black people just because of the distinction in color. They'll have some white patches of skin. They just don't have the pigment there. And so the reference to a leukoderma here. Here's a little structure of chapter 14 or 13. All these various skin diseases. And then he even uses, there's leprosy in clothing. Or a disease in clothing. Can anybody think of something in clothing that we don't want and that will cause some trouble?
Smallpox used to do that. They would.
You got to burn it off, don't you?
Yeah, and maybe even anthrax.
Oh, I don't know. What's the Yellowstone prequel show? 1883?
1824.
1923, 1880, whatever it is, starts with the guy burning his house. That's how the scene starts. Sam Elliott, I love Sam Elliott. He's so cool. It starts with him having to burn his house because of that kind of sickness. Today, we would probably at max be dealing with like mildew or something along those lines. Add some bleach to that wash, it'll take care of it. In chapter 14, we see the ritual for cleansing someone that's been healed of leprosy. And it's a weird ritual, guys. It's some of the things we've read, it goes beyond that. And then he talks about leprosy in a house. That a house can have leprosy or a disease in the house. What could this be a reference to?
When I was reading it, it said mildew.
Mildew.
And then somehow that mildew turns into something infectious. Mm-hmm. And then they're supposed to. That's where
I go is with mold.
Yeah.
Black mold is deadly. So Dad was still alive. So maybe, let's say 2010, Mom started getting really sick and we couldn't figure out what it was. Mom has a little bit of asthma anyway. And just started having breathing troubles, and it wouldn't get better. And we started noticing it was worse when she was at work. Well, they did an inspection on the building, found black mold, and wound up having to completely gut and redo that building. They moved Mom's office down to another place, and it got so bad. She was working from home for a long time. She could just walk into the building to get a file and go back out to the car. And by the time she was out the car, she was wheezing. And I'm sure you can match stories like that. Hey, John, what's your friend that preaches down in Tampa? Frederick Gray. Their house was mold ridden and was killing his wife. Have they resolved that situation yet? I was thinking they were still dealing. So we understand how bad of a situation that can be. You know, if it's a little bit in the corner of the tub or something, that's not a problem. But when it gets in the house, it can cause a serious problem. It makes me wonder if that's the kind of thing he's dealing with here in this disease in the house, or a house with leprosy. Obviously, a house can't have leprosy. Then we have a summary statement of what's going on. All right, let's talk about these skin issues here. Verses 1 through 8, there's a sore on the skin, and maybe it's not healing up right. There's raw flesh that we see here. There's a change in a boil that had been healed. There is an infected burn. There's an infection on the head or the beard. And we understand all of these things, right? You get a little cut, and if it gets just the slightest bit infected, boy, that can cause some problems, right? It can swell and those kind of things. So we can kind of see what's going on here. Verses 38 and 39, white spots all over the body. And then, guys, I'm glad it's in here. Verses 40 through 44 for the bald guys. He says, if your hair is falling out, don't worry. You're just bald. Whew. Or then for me, he says, if the hair of your forehead begins to fall out, don't worry. He says it's just baldness of the forehead. It's such a funny one. And that's what mine would be with the receding hairline. I shaved the rest of it. Wesley's got the typical male pattern baldness starting back here. But I just have the receding hairline. I'm bald in the forehead. He says that's okay. Nothing's wrong, if you have that. Well, that's good to know. And then it's the rules for those with these various diseases. You have to let your clothes hang loose. You have to live outside the camp. And when you come near people, you cover, it says your upper lip. I think the idea is keep your good germs on them, right? Unclean, unclean. And people would have given you a wide berth and probably would have yelled at you to get out of there anyway. And so that's kind of some of these things that are going on. When something on your body is just not right. We don't know what it is, but it's just not right. That's kind of what's going on here. And each of these sections basically tell us kind of the same thing. You have a statement of the symptoms, and then you go to the priest. The priest, I like this, I read this today. The priest is not a doctor. He's more like a health inspector. And so his job is to look at it and be like, yep, that's leprosy, get out of here. Come back in a week. If it's healed up, we'll talk then. But the priestly inspection, the discussion of specific symptoms, and then the diagnosis. Yes, that is leprosy, or no, I hate to break it to you, you're just bald in the forehead. And then on some of these, you would be shut up for a week by yourself, and you'd come back for a second inspection to see if it had gotten any better or anything like that. All right. Questions, comments? We got a lot to do, but take a break here.
I'm just wondering, when I was reading through this, I was thinking to myself that the reason it's declared unclean is maybe these infections might infect others around them. But I'm kind of in a quandary. It could also mean, I don't know if it actually meant that or not, even though it's declared unclean. Maybe it was more of a protection for the person who had the problem as opposed to transmitting it to other people.
Were you reading the same book I was?
No, I just, I
To
couldn't,
that, Victor, I would say, yeah, I've been thinking about
unless it was leprosy. And leprosy
Right.
can be transmitted by,
modern day leprosy is highly contagious.
Yeah.
Highly
but
contagious.
skin diseases,
Psoriasis.
unless you have smallpox, measles,
Right.
or something like that.
Most commentators argue that most of what we have here is some type of psoriasis, which is not really contagious. And so, yes, my initial thought when I read through this is, yeah, this is about contagion and keeping contagions away. But then if you remember the context in which we're dealing with, remember in chapter 10, Nadab and Abihu are struck down because they did not make a distinction between the clean and the unclean. All right? And then in chapter 16, the high priest is going to have to go into the most holy place to cleanse everything because impurity is tangible and can get on stuff, right? And so if you are impure because of this skin disease, whatever it may be, you can't go to the temple. You can't bring that impurity in there. And so in essence, God is really saving them from bringing an impurity into such a pure, holy place. So yeah, I've gone back and forth on those two things a good bit as well. As to which one is when people get sick, it's always a good idea to keep them away. But my family's been trying to run away from me all week. Guys, when I got home Sunday, I could barely talk. And it was just gone. The doctor said, well, bad news. No medicine's going to do it for you. You'll be better in 7 to 10 days. And I was like, okay. So lots of naps this week. I've been trying to get lots of naps. It's been horrible.
And as far as the boils go, you know, people, as far as I know, I don't know if that's transmissible or not, but the Black Plague they had boils come up. Mm-hmm. So, I don't.
Yeah.
What's going on? What is
most commentators say that it's less medical and more ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And in the context, I would probably tend to lean towards that. Though there might be a benefit of taking the sick person and putting them over there by themselves and kind of getting rid of some of this.
Just because God said it, it was so.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
Yep.
He declared it, it's so.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Job had the boils and
Right.
the sores, but they didn't really separate from him.
Right. Yeah. Have any of y'all ever had a boil? Staph? Is that what it is?
It's unclean, it's actually like, really someone gets a boil from, that's what they told my mother about my brother.
It's an infection?
When he was young.
Yeah. I know when my dad...
He was at a camp and he comes out.
Oh, okay. I know when my dad was a young teenager, he got one on his knee, and he said he had kidney stones and everything, and nothing really hurt any more than that. I was kind of thinking, remember a couple of years ago, I got shingles on my hand, and just that kind of a thing. I could see how someone would be like, "Yep, you're in the outhouse over there. Have a good week. We'll inspect you in another week." All right, let's talk about the ritual that went into dealing with this, the sacrifices. It was costly. If you've been in this condition, And then you've now been made clean. Let's get this clear. The sacrifice did not bring about the cleanness or the cure. You got better somehow or another. Maybe Jesus made you better. And then you offered the sacrifice for ritual cleansing is what's going on here. So you take 2 birds, you break open one of them over a bowl of water and mix the water and the blood. And then you take this cedar wood, this string, and this hyssop, and the other bird, and you dip them all in this, and you put some of the blood concoction on the guy that's just been healed or the lady that's just been healed, and you send the bird off. And wait, what do we do with the string? Is the string on the bird? Is it a carrier pigeon? What are we dealing with here? Is the string wrapped around the hyssop and then used to dab the blood? Probably is what's going on. But the 2 bird thing is very similar to the Day of Atonement. But remember what's going on in the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement is all about cleansing. We got to cleanse the tabernacle. We got to cleanse the altars. Well, what's going on here? We got to cleanse this man. We got to cleanse this individual who has been unclean, and now he can become clean again. After a time, he's going to wash his clothes. Everybody appreciated that. He's going to shave, and he's going to bathe. And we're kind of this cleanness or this cleansing here that happens. This is a type of baptism that we could talk about from the Old Testament here. And then is where all the cost comes in. He's going to offer everything but a peace offering here. And so this would have gotten kind of expensive. There's a guilt offering, sin offering, burnt offering, and grain offerings here. And my question to that is, why so much? Furthermore, the guy hadn't even been able to work, probably. One, doesn't seem that it was just an extremely common thing. In fact, people that were in these situations usually got very desperate with these. You think maybe of Naaman in 2 Kings 5. And then you think of, do you remember when Miriam and Aaron opposed Moses and God strikes her with leprosy and they lose their minds? It was a desperate situation. And it didn't happen that often, and you're going from being completely exiled in the community because, as Victor was hinting at, you can't bring that uncleanness into God's people. You have to be outside the camp. But now you're getting to come back inside the camp. It takes a lot. A lot has to happen for that. All right, and then I know we can ask a lot of questions and kind of get to what John was hinting at here. At the end of the day, Moses doesn't tell us a whole lot. I think we can rest assured they knew very well what they were dealing with, and the priest could look at it and very much see what was happening here. So what's the symbolism here? Do y'all remember my first slide? I need to reiterate this. What was my first slide?
Impurity is not equal to sin.
Impurity does not equal sin. And I stand beside that. So work with me here. It does not equal sin, but it is symbolic of sin. Does that make sense? It doesn't. So it's like in John 9, the blind man. Do you remember what the apostles say? Who sinned? This man or his parents? And Jesus says, neither. So the blindness didn't equal sin. But it did symbolize the condition someone would be in sin because he was blind. He was spiritually blind at the moment as well. So that's kind of what's going on here. It's just a reminder of what sin is and the consequences of sin. It's a reminder of the interaction of man and his environment and how he can come into contact with sin. He can come into contact with these things that pollute and make one unclean, that cause them to be impure. And well, I think there is a contagious aspect to it. I got rebuked the other day on a Facebook post. I didn't take it to heart, don't worry, for using the term contagion. it was a discussion about the whole trans movement, and I said, it's just a social contagion, and the guy was offended by that. He can stay offended, I don't care. Because that's what it is. Ideas are contagious. Diseases are, that's what made COVID so bad. Looking back, COVID was not bad because it killed billions of people. No, COVID was bad because of how easy it was to transmit it, and just could almost jump from one person to the next. And so that's what made it so bad. So ideas are contagious. Right now we have with the trans movement, when we were in Yuma, Arizona, the big thing at the time, the amount of middle school and high school girls claiming to be bisexual the numbers were outrageous. It was the thing to do. Not that they were practicing, but it was cool to be bi. These ideas are contagious. Sin is contagious. And we see this in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. When the man has his father's wife, Paul says, get him out of there. Don't you know that what?
Little leaven.
Little leaven. Leaven's the whole lump. It's contagious, is the idea there. Benny?
Be careful that you don't border on hereditary depravity here now.
Well, that's very true. We're not talking about, we're not talking about you becoming guilty because somebody else did something. We're talking about the influence.
Yeah.
Evil companions corrupt good morals, is the idea. Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right there, Benny. And then obviously this brings us to a discussion of Jesus and his interaction with lepers. Because that's, I think, where we see maybe the most of this. And we see Jesus breaking down these barriers. That no longer are they excluded. He is able to fix that barrier there. He is able to deal with that, and his power to conquer sin is the idea. And Jesus, listen, when Matthew or whichever the Gospels say it, that Jesus reached out and touched the leper, we've read it so much, that's a little callous to us, or we're a little callous to it. They would have been so shocked to read that a rabbi, a holy man, would reach out and touch a leper. And so the idea kind of becomes that the leprosy is no longer contagious. The holiness is contagious with Jesus. Benny?
That's what crossed my mind about with him touching the lepers. Did he go through the ritual of the sacrifice for touching something unclean?
Did Jesus do that?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be, because it seems that the contagion was going from him to them, not from them to him. Yeah. But do you remember when Jesus healed the lepers, what did he say?
Go to the priest and we're supposed to
go to the priest and offer your sacrifices. Yeah. And so even though he could break down that wall, and he had that power, they still had to go and do what the law instructed them to do. All right, bodily discharges. Y'all ready? This is always fun. A little bit of a chiastic structure here. Verses 1 through 15, dealing with males who have discharges requiring sacrifices. Then you have male discharges that do not require sacrifice, the typical one being the one that is associated with sexual activity. It did not require a sacrifice. I think you bathed and you were unclean until evening. We'll talk a little bit more about that as it makes its way through some stories in the Bible. And then we have female discharges that do not require sacrifice. This would be like your monthly cycle, that kind of a thing. And then the female discharges which do require sacrifice. I don't think I have this on the next slide. So who comes to mind on that last point?
The woman with the issue of blood.
Right. The woman with the flow of blood that had had it for how long?
All of her life. Well, not all of her life.
12 years. 12 years, yeah. And so, all women have this one on a regular basis up to a certain age, but 12 years straight, that's a problem. And this poor woman in that condition wouldn't have been able to participate in temple worship or a lot of these things. And obviously, I would think after Jesus heals her, she would have had to go and make sacrifice there. And then we have a summary in verses 31 through 32 about this defiling the tabernacle. And so all of this goes back not so much to health issues, but to God being in their presence. And because you have fallen humanity in a fallen world, our bodies can become unwhole. They can become imperfect. And in those situations, sacrifices had to be offered. They had to become clean again or pure again before you could come back into God's presence. So a couple of stories here, Bible stories that I would like to think about for just a moment in the few minutes we have left. Do you remember when Jacob and his family runs from Laban and Rachel steals her dad's household idols? And Laban tracks them down, and because Jacob's traveling with children, and that always takes longer, right? I don't know why. But it always takes longer. So Laban catches him, and he says, "You stole my idols." And Jacob says, "Oh, absolutely I did not. And the person on whom you find them, you can kill them." But we know that Rachel had taken them, and she's sitting on them. And she says that the time of the month, the way of woman, is upon her. And so the question is, was she lying or not? That's why she won't stand up, because the way of woman. So if she's not lying, she has just made these idols very unclean. And so that's kind of a humorous thing, actually. A little bit more in depth in that story than we typically go, right? In Exodus 19 at verse 15, they are preparing to meet God at Mount Sinai, and God says, "Go and wash yourselves and do not go near a woman," because women are evil, right? No, because that activity made one unclean, and God is about to come into their presence. He's going to descend upon the mountain, and you cannot be unclean, obviously. It's not about women per se, it's about the activity which makes them unclean. Deuteronomy 23, verses 9 through 11, in the midst of holy war, men were not to go to their wives. Does that maybe give us a little bit more info on Uriah not going home to Bathsheba? Now he says, "How can I do this thing while my men are out at war?" Almost makes it sound like a camaraderie thing, but if this is holy war, then he can't go and defile himself. That sounds bad. Make himself impure, even with his own wife, something that's perfectly fine to do. At that moment, it's improper. 1 Samuel 21, David and the priest of Nob. David goes to this priest and he says, "Do you have a sword?" "Yeah, I got Goliath's sword." "All right, great. Do you have any bread?" He goes, "Well, I have the bread of the presence. You're really not supposed to eat that, but I'll allow it if the men have not been near a woman." And he says, "No, we're out to war. They never go near women when we're out to war." Again, this idea of holy war there. Do you remember the description of Bathsheba and why she's bathing? She was coming off of her time of uncleanness. And so she is bathing after that when David sees her. And I had never thought about this. It is very strict about what the sexual act does in making one unclean. Again, obviously that's not sinful. God told man, "Be fruitful and multiply." But that act does make one ritually unclean. And the woman's flow makes a woman unclean, and such stringent laws immediately make fertility cults and temple prostitution, immediately kicks those right out. Because if you're going to participate in this in worship to God, which is what the pagans said they were doing, you immediately become unclean in the presence of God, and you've just made a mess of the whole situation. And so we might say something that God ties that up in a nice little bow right there. That you can't make yourself unclean in the presence of God, so fertility cults and temple prostitution are right out. And the temple prostitution gets even worse under the time of the kings, doesn't it? When it becomes male cult prostitutes that Hezekiah and Josiah have to clear out there. Y'all ready to quit talking about bodily discharges? Nobody likes bodily, even today, but we're like, no, that's between you and your doctor alone.
Not a small fertility cult, probably though.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So again, this is about ritually being impure and considering how we come to God. And while we don't have these kind of impurities, we do have to be careful approaching God with sin. You think of Isaiah, woe is me, for I'm a man of unclean lips. Woe is me, for I'm undone. That's the phrase. I love the old King James of that. And then Peter says to Jesus, depart from me, for I'm a sinner. And so we see some of that. Not that, I've been out working in the shop, I've got grease all over me, and I can't go to Bible class because I'm dirty. Not what we're talking about at all. Even though I've heard horror stories about that kind of thing. But we see the emphasis here, and so it's just a reminder that we have to make sure our hearts are pure, our minds are pure, our lives are pure, that kind of thing. Jess and I were talking with Derek beforehand, and that's a tall order, and that's what we're striving for, and the blood of Christ makes that possible. I'll wrap that all up in a nice little bow, and
Is it any war, or just what would be a holy war?
her question is it any war or holy war? Yeah, if you're just going out to battle for the day, I don't know. Holy war was something that God specifically declared.
Like taking land.
So yeah, and Jericho was declared holy war. Everything there was devoted to God, and so
That would have really set them apart.
it very much would have set them apart. Yeah, because other nations, they go in and take a city and they take the women too. Absolutely. What you see to kind of go along with that is they would take they would take a specific law from the law of Moses, and they would wind up applying it with a very broad brush. And so maybe they did that in war as well, that all fighting becomes holy war, basically.
Especially when it was taken in the land of Canaan.
Yes,
When
absolutely.
David was brought in the kingdom back that was supposed to be taken during Joshua's time.
Right. That's that's when you're introduced to the idea of harem. I have to say the correct Hebrew way, because otherwise it just sounds like harem. No, that's not what we're talking about there. But yeah, so you might probably just applying it with a broad brush there.
And that's what covered, you're right.
Yeah.
Because they were.
Absolutely. Yep. Getting lands that they should have gotten years before. Right. All right. Thank you much, guys. Appreciate it.